Here is the practical test. When you see an argument, ask, can the premise be true while the conclusion is still false? Let's test it. Premise, he worked harder than everyone else. Conclusion, he deserves to win. Now ask, could he truly have worked harder than everyone else and still not deserve to win? Yes. Welcome to Joe's Thinking Lunch, driven by curiosity. Some statements sound powerful, not because they have fully established the conclusion, but because they contain a factor that feels true, important, and easy to accept. For example, he worked harder than everyone else, so he deserves to win. At first, this sounds fair. Hard work matters. Effort deserves respect. And we want effort to be rewarded. But in logic, the real question is not only does this fact matter, the real question is does this fact support the conclusion strongly enough? Let's slow the sentence down. He worked harder than everyone else, so he deserves to win. This is not a meaningless statement. If the first part is true, it tells us something important. He worked hard. He invested time and energy. He may deserve respect, but that is not the same as saying, therefore, he deserves to win. He worked harder is the premise. He deserves to win is the conclusion. The key question is, does this premise establish that conclusion? An argument is usually do two things. It gives us a reason, then it asks us to accept a conclusion. In this example, the reason is he worked harder than everyone else. The conclusion is he deserves to win. Now the issue becomes much clearer. Does the conclusion actually follow from the reason? Or more precisely, is hard work enough to establish entitlement to win? That is the connection we need to test. For this argument to work, it needs a hidden bridge. Working harder than everyone else is enough to show that he deserves to win. But that bridge is not automatic. In some situations, it might work. If the rules of the contest is whoever works hardest wins, then effort is decisive standard. But in many situations, winning does not depend only on effort. It may depend on the rules. It may depend on the result. It may depend on the quality of performance. It may depend on whether the required standard was met. So the issue is not whether effort has value. The issue is this premise strong enough to establish this conclusion? Here is the practical test. When you see an argument, ask, can the premise be true while the conclusion is still false? Let's test it. Premise, he worked harder than everyone else. Conclusion, he deserves to win. Now ask, could he truly have worked harder than everyone else and still not deserve to win? Yes, if the rules reward result rather than effort, he may not deserve to win. If someone else performed better, he may not deserve to win. If his effort went in the wrong direction, he may not deserve to win. So the premise can be true, while the conclusion can still fail. That means the premise may support the conclusion, but it does not establish the conclusion. That is the core reasoning move. If the premise can be true while the conclusion is false, then the premise has not established the conclusion. More simply, some support is not full proof. Now let's move to a more legal and LSAT style example. Someone says he had motive, so he must have done it. This also sounds compelling. Motive gives the story a shape, but we should run the same test. The reason is he had motive. The conclusion is he did it. The hidden bridge is having motive is enough to establish action. Now ask, can someone have motive and still not have done it? Of course, maybe he had no opportunity. Maybe the timeline does not fit. Maybe there is no difference of action. So motive may support suspicion, but motive by itself does not establish action. The same structure appears again. A reason that gives some support is treated as if it establishes the conclusion. This pattern appears in everyday judgment, legal analysis, LSAT reasoning, and public debate. So the rule is if the premise can be true while the conclusion is false, then the premise has not established the conclusion. That is the precise reason. The easier memory line is some support is not foolproof, or a stronger sounding claim is not the same as a complete argument. The next time you hear a powerful statement, do not only ask, does it sound reasonable? Ask, what is the reason? What is the conclusion? Can the reason be true while the conclusion is still false? In everyday language, ask, what else could still be true? That question helps you find the gap between the reason and the conclusion. Very often, the problem with an argument is not that it has no support at all. The problem is it has some support, but not enough. Thanks for watching Joe's Thinking Launch. Stay curious. See you next time.